You ever get a letter so absurd, so wildly out of pocket, that your first instinct is to laugh, and then you realize someone's actually serious? That was me the day I found an official-looking envelope shoved into my mailbox, printed with the words, Lakewood Pines HOA Compliance Division. Inside was a notice so dripping with entitlement, it practically stuck to my fingers. According to the letter, I had 48 hours to remove my boat, a humble aluminium fishing vessel my grandfather bought in 1956, from community waters or face a fine of $500 per day. They even threatened to have it towed at my expense. I read that part twice, just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. What made it especially laughable was that Lake Bradford, the very lake they were referring to, had belonged to my family for 3 generations. It was private property. Always had been. The boat they were threatening to impound? It had more history and legal right to that water than the entire HOA combined. Let me back up a second. My name is Ethan Bradford. I spent most of my adult life building cybersecurity systems for financial institutions, stressful work, endless hours, and a constant flow of caffeine and chaos. But all that changed 6 months ago when I sold my company in Austin. The deal was clean. The number was high. And for the first time in my life, I had both time and peace. So, I moved back to a place that had always felt like home, my grandfather's cabin on Lake Bradford. Nestled just outside the reach of the city but still close enough to civilization. It wasn't flashy, just a sturdy cedar cabin, a wooden dock, and a slice of water that shimmered like glass in the early morning sun. Grandpa used to call it heaven with fish in it. I'd spent the last few months renovating the place. Not tearing it apart, just upgrading where it mattered. Insulation, solar panels, a reliable satellite internet connection. The rest I left untouched. The creaky porch swing, the tackle box with rusted lures, even the old no trespassing sign that leaned half-faded against the boathouse door. That boat, the one the HOA took issue with, was practically a family heirloom. My grandfather, a World War II vet turned conservationist, had taught me to fish in it. He was a quiet man with calloused hands, who believed in hard work, personal freedom, and keeping government and bureaucracy as far away from your lake as humanly possible. Which made this HOA notice even more ridiculous. I flipped the paper over. Unauthorized vessel in violation of community aesthetics. That line made me snort out loud. The boat wasn't pretty. I'll give them that. It had chipped paint, a dent in the side from a misjudged dock approach, and the unmistakable patina of history. But it floated. It ran. And more importantly, it was on private water. There was no community lake here. Not legally. Not historically. Not even by some weird zoning technicality. Lake Bradford was on my deed. Not partially. Not conditionally. Entirely. That's when it hit me, this wasn't just a mistake. This was a move. Someone was testing the waters, no pun intended, trying to see if I'd roll over. If I'd fall in line like the rest of the HOA pushed residents in the area. But they clearly didn't know who they were dealing with. I wasn't some absentee landowner or weekend vacationer. I was Ethan Bradford. And this lake had my name on it. Literally. Still, I needed to be smart. So, I took photos of the letter, the boat, and the shoreline. I pulled out the manila envelope with property records I'd brought with me when I moved, complete with the 1954 deed signed by my grandfather and the updated county maps reaffirming the boundaries. I even had the survey from a decade ago that marked Lake Bradford as 100% privately owned. I sat at the kitchen table, the HOA letter in one hand, and my grandfather's faded deed in the other, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, righteous fury. They wanted a fight? Oh, I'd give them one. But first, I called someone who knew the law better than I did. By the time I got off the phone with Emma Roth, my longtime friend and now a highly respected environmental lawyer, I had already set up 2 high-definition trail cameras and started cataloging everything related to Lake Bradford deeds. boundary surveys, county assessments. Emma had one response when I read her the HOA's violation letter. They messed with the wrong lake. She promised to drive up that weekend. Let's get our ducks in a row, she said. Because something tells me this is about more than just a boat. Turned out she was absolutely right. The very next morning, I walked down to the dock, coffee in hand, and felt that kind of eerie stillness that makes your stomach twist. My grandfather's boat, gone. The ropes were sliced clean. In its place was a laminated placard zip-tied to the post, impounded for non-compliance with community guidelines. Contact HOA enforcement. My jaw clenched so hard I thought a molar might crack. They hadn't just threatened me, they followed through. Without notice. Without a warrant. On private property. It was theft. Plain and simple. And I had a very good idea who was behind it. Her name was Karen Whitmore. HOA president. Local menace. Self-appointed guardian of community standards. And as I was about to learn, a woman with far bigger ambitions than just regulating mailbox colors. She was also the founder of a pompous little group called the Lakewood Elite Anglers. I'd found their page buried on the HOA's website, photos of men in $1,000 fishing vests, grinning beside overgrown trout while cheap champagne popped in the background. The captions made my blood boil, celebrating another successful tournament on our beautiful Lakewood Pines waterfront. Except the lake in every photo? It was my lake. My dock. My shoreline. My trees in the background. Even my grandfather's old boathouse in one shot. I scrolled through years of documented trespassing masquerading as community events. One photo, dated just 3 months before I moved in, showed a temporary dock being installed by a group of HOA volunteers. In another, there were tents, food trucks, even a live band. They had turned my family's lake into their private country club, and now they were pretending it was theirs. That night, as I reviewed everything with Emma over video call, she said what I'd already been thinking. They're trying to normalize control. If they get away with it long enough, they'll claim historical usage. Maybe even try to lobby for adverse possession. But that's not even the worst part. What is? I asked. She sent me a link. It was a zoning pre-application from the county website, filed under the name Whitmore Development Group, LLC. The proposal? A luxury lakefront resort, complete with private villas, a members-only marina, a golf course, and a gated spa compound, all planned for the eastern shoreline of Lake Bradford. I stared at the screen, stunned. They weren't just borrowing my lake. They were planning to steal it, permanently. Emma highlighted a line in the developer's mission statement that made my skin crawl. Lakewood Pines community has exclusive jurisdiction over the lake, with plans for expanded access and revenue generation for HOA members. They were selling something they didn't own. No wonder they wanted the boat gone. No wonder Karen was ramping up enforcement. My return, and my presence, was a threat to the illusion they'd carefully built over the years. I was the fly in their $1 million ointment. Let them keep the boat, Emma said calmly. We'll add theft to the list of charges later. She had that look in her eyes, the one I remembered from our college debate team days, right before she dismantled some poor law student in front of a packed auditorium. This isn't just about reclaiming your lake anymore, Ethan, she said. This is going to be a reckoning. And with that, the real fight began. Emma arrived at Lake Bradford on a Thursday morning in a silver Subaru with California plates, a laptop bag slung over one shoulder and fire in her eyes. I'd never seen anyone more ready to pick a legal fight before finishing their coffee. She stepped out, took one look at the shimmering lake, and muttered, "You can smell the fraud in the air." We got right to work. The cameras were first, 8 in total, small, waterproof, and hidden in birdhouses and hollowed tree trunks. Each one had motion sensors and 4K resolution, with automatic upload to a secure cloud drive. We focused on the eastern shoreline, where the elite anglers had been launching their boats and hosting unauthorized gatherings. One camera even overlooked the spot where Karen's so-called marina development zone was quietly marked by pink plastic flags hidden in the grass. By the time the sun dipped behind the trees, we had a full digital perimeter. Next came the documents. We cleared a long dining table inside the cabin and laid out 3 generations worth of land records like it was a crime scene, which, in a way, it was. Emma, in her element, pulled up the original land grant from 1954, the updated deed from my father's ownership transfer, and the 2011 survey that clearly outlined Lake Bradford as 100% private property, extending 15 feet beyond the waterline in every direction. "You see this?" she said, tapping a highlighted section. "The HOA would need an easement or usage agreement to legally access even a single inch of this. And they have nothing. No contract. No permit. Nothing in the county files." I nodded slowly. "So how have they been convincing people otherwise?" She smirked and pulled out her laptop. "Time to find out." It didn't take long. Buried deep within the HOA's public records, available through a login portal we got access to thanks to a very cooperative neighbor named Mrs. Larkins, was a community orientation packet sent to all new homeowners. Page 9 was titled Lakewood Pines Amenities and Regulations. There it was in black and white. Lake Bradford, herein referred to as Lakewood Community Lake, is under the jurisdiction and regulation of the Lakewood Pines Homeowners Association. All recreational activities, including boating, fishing, and events, must comply with HOA guidelines. I read it twice. Stunned. They'd even renamed the lake. Just casually renamed it. Emma was typing furiously. "This is misrepresentation on an institutional level. They've been conditioning residents to believe the lake is HOA managed from the moment they move in. We're talking a full-blown disinformation campaign." I looked out the window, past the dock where my grandfather once sat teaching me how to tie a Palomar knot, and felt the weight of it. They weren't just lying to me. They were lying to everyone. That night, we stayed up cataloging everything. Photos of HOA events trespassing on my land. Screenshots from the HOA website. PDF copies of newsletters referring to the lake as our community jewel. Even a video posted by the elite anglers of their exclusive club barbecue complete with a drone shot that clearly showed my private boathouse in the frame. By midnight, we had a folder labeled, "Evidence, HOA Fraud and Trespass, Lake Bradford." "We could go to the sheriff now," I said. "But it'd be my word against theirs without this." Emma nodded. "And they'd spin it as a misunderstanding. But not for long. Because you're not the only one they've lied to." She turned her laptop toward me. It was a list of residents, dozens of them. Every single one had paid annual HOA dues that, according to budget reports, included lake maintenance, fishing access, and waterfront infrastructure upgrades. Line items that amounted to over $50,000 per year. For a lake the HOA had no right to touch. "They've been charging people for access they don't legally have," Emma said. "And you know what that means?" "Fraud," I answered quietly. She smiled. "Exactly. And if they've pocketed that money or used it to fund Karen's fantasy resort project, we're looking at criminal liability, maybe even a RICO case if there's a pattern." I leaned back in my chair, letting that settle in. This wasn't just a property dispute anymore. This was a scheme. One that had stolen from homeowners, manipulated public records, and weaponized bureaucracy, all under the banner of a rogue HOA. "Still think we're dealing with a bunch of annoying bureaucrats?" Emma asked. I shook my head. "No," I said. "We're dealing with crooks. And tomorrow, I'm going to their meeting." Saturday arrived with a sky so blue it could have been painted, perfect weather for a fishing tournament. By 8 a.m., trucks with trailers were lining the dirt road to Lake Bradford's eastern shoreline, pulling in dozens of glossy base boats, temporary grills, and pop-up tents. Loudspeakers crackled to life with bad country music, and the smell of cheap barbecue floated across the water. It should have been a celebration. Instead, it became the beginning of the end. From the deck of my cabin, Emma and I watched the chaos unfold with binoculars and a steaming pot of coffee between us. My cameras had captured everything since dawn: attendees trampling over private grasslands, HOA board members waving people in, and most notably, Karen Whitmore herself, strutting along the dock like a queen surveying her stolen kingdom. She wore a white windbreaker with Lakewood Pines HOA embroidered over her heart like a badge. Behind her trailed Gerald Wexler, the head of the elite anglers club and a man who'd once tried to offer me exclusive access to my own lake. They had no idea what was coming. At 10:17 a.m., our plan kicked into motion. The first step was the deputy, a no-nonsense woman named Sergeant Eliza Kane from the county sheriff's office. Tall, calm, and built like someone who could stop a bar fight just by raising an eyebrow. She arrived in a patrol SUV and parked it right at the tournament's entrance. Stepping out with a large folder in one hand and a radio in the other, people started whispering. Step 2, Emma and I approached, flanked by a private security contractor we'd hired to erect no trespassing, private property signs around the area. Within minutes, 6 signs went up, right in the middle of the tournament grounds, each one clearly marked with our GPS coordinates and citation of the newly signed emergency injunction from the county court. The reaction was instant. Anglers dropped their poles. Spectators craned their necks. One guy in a Bass Pro Shops hat actually choked on his hot dog. Karen stormed toward us like she was marching to war, flanked by 2 other HOA board members with clipboards and confused expressions. "This is a private event," Karen snapped, stopping just short of me. "You're trespassing on community property." Sergeant Kane stepped forward, completely unfazed. "Actually, ma'am, you're the ones trespassing." She held up the court document for everyone to see. "This is a verified injunction from Judge Rourke of the District Court," she announced, her voice loud and clear. "It confirms that Lake Bradford and the surrounding shoreline are legally owned by Mr. Ethan Bradford. The HOA has no legal authority to manage or permit access to this property." Dead silence. Karen's face went pale, her perfectly applied foundation doing little to hide the flush of panic. That can't be right," she stammered. "We've managed this lake for over a decade. We have standing precedent. You have nothing." Emma cut in smoothly. "No easement. No deed. No agreement. What you've done is mislead your residents and exploit private land for profit. We have photographs, documents, and witnesses. And this event? It just became evidence." Someone in the crowd, an older man in a fishing vest, spoke up. "Wait. Are you saying this whole thing has been illegal?" Dozens of heads turned toward Karen. Emma nodded. "Yes. The HOA has falsely claimed ownership of a private lake and charged fees for access they don't have the right to grant. That's not just unethical, it's potentially criminal." And then came the third and final blow. Out of a sleek, black SUV stepped 4 well-dressed individuals, the resort investors. One of them, a woman in a navy pantsuit and mirrored sunglasses, walked up to Karen holding a leather binder filled with architectural renderings. "Is this true?" she asked, pointing to the court order. "You told us this lake was secured, that it was under full HOA control." Karen tried to recover, but it was too late. "We have historical arrangements," Emma cut her off, producing a printed copy of the property deed and laying it across a folding table like a royal flush. "Historical arrangements don't trump legally recorded ownership. You've been trying to sell access to something that never belonged to you." The investor's expression hardened. Without another word, she turned and walked briskly toward her car. The rest of her team followed, their contracts, plans, and millions of dollars vanishing with each step. Karen stood frozen, abandoned, and exposed. Sergeant Kane turned back to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, this event is now over. Please pack up your belongings and vacate the property. If you refuse, you may be subject to legal action." Slowly, the crowd began to disperse. Tents came down. Coolers were dragged back to trucks. Dozens of confused, Angry residents asked questions, none of which Karen had answers for. She didn't even try to respond. Instead, she backed away quietly, slipped behind a golf cart, and disappeared down the trail, leaving her clipboard and her empire behind. Emma leaned over and whispered, "That was satisfying." I just smiled. We're not done yet. By Monday morning, Karen Whitmore was gone. No press conference. No apology. Just a black Lexus seen pulling out of her gated driveway at dawn and a for sale sign in the front yard by lunch. Turns out, the self-declared queen of Lakewood Pines had a history, one she'd spent years burying. Emma found it first. An archived disciplinary record from the Florida Real Estate Commission, license revoked for fraudulent property marketing practices. Same woman. Slightly different name, Karen Whitaker. Different state. Same playbook. Fabricate ownership. Sell access. Vanish when cornered. Only this time, she hadn't made it out clean. In the weeks following the fishing tournament disaster, Sarah Rios, an investigative reporter from the regional news outlet, picked up our story. The headline read, "HOA President Exposed in Multi-State Fraud Scheme, Local Man Reclaims His Family Lake." It went viral. HOA watchdog groups reposted it. Environmental forums discussed it. And in town, the effect was immediate and seismic. The Lakewood Pines HOA board collapsed like a house of wet cardboard. Half resigned within days. The other half tried to spin their ignorance as innocence. But the residents weren't buying it. At the next community meeting, Ethan Bradford was invited to speak. That's when I stood in front of a packed room of over 100 residents. Some angry. Some ashamed. Most just confused. I held up a single laminated sign, the one they'd zip-tied to my dock, demanding my boat's removal, and said, "This lake has always been mine. But that doesn't mean it can't be ours, if we respect it, and each other." The room was quiet for a beat. Then it broke into applause. That moment became the seed of something new. With help from Emma, Sarah Rios, and a surprising number of residents who wanted real transparency, we founded the Bradford Lake Conservation Trust, a non-profit built on 3 pillars: preserve, educate, share. The idea was simple. Annual community access passes, issued fairly and affordably, strict conservation rules, no motors, no dumping, and no unauthorized events. A volunteer oversight committee, led by both residents and outside environmental experts. The fishing club was revived too, but with a new name, Lake Bradford Anglers. Open to anyone who passed a conservation awareness course and agreed to follow the new ethical catch and release guidelines. Gone were the $1,000 dues and the velvet rope exclusivity. Now, local kids could fish off the community pier. Elderly veterans came out on Wednesdays for quiet hours. Even the picnic tables were repainted by a group of teens who wanted community service hours. The Eastern Shore, once slated for a luxury resort, was reclaimed and transformed into a small, peaceful public park. It had a winding trail, a modest wooden pier, and a bronze plaque mounted on a stone at the water's edge. It read, "In honor of Walter Bradford, who believed that water was life, not leverage." Every time I walk by that plaque, I hear my grandfather's voice again, gruff, steady, and impossibly wise. "You take care of the water, Ethan, and the water takes care of you." That's what I do now. Every morning, I launch his old boat from the rebuilt dock, freshly painted but still bearing its dents and scuffs, like battle scars, and cast a line just as he used to. Sometimes I catch something. Sometimes I don't. Either way, I win. Ray Delgado still drops by to join me on occasion, spinning tall tales and remembering the good old days when Karen tried to tell him his boathouse was too aesthetically disruptive. We laugh about it now, though at the time, neither of us were smiling. Emma, for her part, stayed involved. She now sits on the board of the Conservation Trust and makes sure no one even thinks about touching the lake without a proper permit and 6 copies of notarized documentation. Her name became a quiet legend in the HOA reform movement. As for the HOA itself, what's left of it? It exists now only in name. Mostly as a mechanism for maintaining the park landscaping and collecting minor dues. No more enforcement squads. No more violations over wind chimes or mailbox paint. They tried to turn this lake into profit. We turned it into purpose. And every time someone stops me at the dock to say, "I had no idea this was your lake," I smile and say, "It's not just mine. It's ours, now that we all finally know the truth."